Thanks everyone so much for joining. We will wait just another 30 seconds to a minute to let folks filter in. We'll get started. All right, maybe we can start going and let folks filter in as they log on. Hello, everyone. My name is David Long. I'm a transportation planner at the SFCTA, and I am managing the school access plan. Thank you all so much for joining. Before we begin today, Supervisor Gordon Marr, who requested this work and has supported it throughout with great partnership from his office, has a few words that he would like to say, but I'd also like to share that we have translation available in both Spanish and Cantonese, so I'll pass it off to our in-language experts to make that announcement before passing it to Supervisor Marr to say a few words. Esteban, would you like to share?
Buenas tardes a todos, todas y todos. Gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde para esta presentación. Esta reunión cuenta con servicio de interpretación en español, pero primero vamos a escuchar unas palabras del supervisor Gordon Marr.
Thanks. And George, would you like to make the same announcement?
各位歡迎嚟到舊金山學校交通計劃嘅社區簡報。如果需要中文翻譯服務嘅話，請點擊屏幕以下一陣會出現嘅 Breakout Room 收睇中文嘅會議內容，我會做你哋嘅翻譯。如果有需要嘅話，請使用會議中嘅 Raise Hand 功能同我哋溝通。同時今日我哋好歡迎馬兆明市參事嚟到來臨參加我哋呢個會議，呢個計劃亦都係佢倡議提出嘅。等一陣馬市參事會同我哋講幾句説話。Thank you.
Thank you, George. With that, I'd like to thank Supervisor Marr for his interest and support in the study, and I'll pass it to you if you'd like to say a few words.
Great. Thank you so much, David. And thanks everybody for joining us this evening for this community update on the San Francisco School Access Plan. This evening, we'll share a presentation from staff of the County Transportation Authority, giving an overview of the plan, the initial findings, and also the draft recommendations, and then also highlighting the outreach that led to them, as well as highlighting what the next steps are in this project as this project moves forward, and opportunities for input from parents and caregivers. A little background, just this school access plan has really been a long time in the works. Former Supervisor Katie Tang first began working looking at the challenges of school transportation after we saw a reduction in yellow school buses following the 2008 recession. And then when I succeeded her as district court supervisor in 2019, I continued this work and really commissioned this comprehensive citywide plan. Amidst a pandemic and expanding the scope through state grant support, as well as new transportation models and new approaches to school assignment policies, this plan really has been years in the making. I really want to thank David and the staff for the County Transportation Authority, as well as the school district and SFMTA who worked on this. I'm really proud of the breadth of the solutions under consideration, and really also the equity-focused outreach that's happened, and just the collaboration across different city agencies. including the city's Department of Children, Youth, and their families, and especially from public school families and community groups. That's really brought us here. Providing sustainable, accessible, and convenient transportation for students and caregivers is critical for addressing a whole host of challenges, including our climate action targets, our transit first policies, and our commitment to do right by kids and parents. And getting to school should never be a barrier to going to school. And as a public school parent myself, I know our families face real challenges here, challenges that are proven by the data showing that the vast majority of public school kids are being driven to school. It doesn't have to be that way. And the problems we must solve to shift this are real and complex, and I think are solvable. And that's why I commissioned this plan in a sincere effort to look at creating new options to support parents to get their kids to school in safer and more sustainable ways. So thanks again to David and the staff for working on this, for sharing this community update tonight, and thanks everyone who's here for joining us, and for hopefully for a lot of good input that you're going to provide tonight, as well as in the next phase of the project. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks, Supervisor Ma. I think with that, we can break out into language-specific rooms. Esteban, would you like to make that announcement?
De nuevo, reiteramos que esta presentación cuenta con interpretación en español. Puede unirse a la sala de español haciendo clic en Breakout Rooms en la parte inferior de su pantalla y seleccionando la sala de español para escuchar esta presentación en español con diapositivas también disponibles en español en su pantalla.
And George, can you make the same announcement?
好多謝馬兆明市參署同我哋講咗一番説話，跟住落嚟咧，我哋可以去我哋嘅廣東話嘅 breakout room。如果需要中文翻譯嘅話咧，你哋可以喺下邊呢個熒幕嘅下邊，如果你見到一個 more， 咁你 click 咗佢就見到一個 breakout room， 嗰度咧就可以入去，我哋有中文翻譯服務，收睇中文嘅會議內容。多謝，而家我哋就進入我哋嘅 breakout room 啦。
All right, thank you. Give folks a couple of minutes to get where they, well, a couple of seconds at least to get where they need to go, and then we can get started. All right. George, are you still in the main room with us? I think that you should be joining the Cantonese breakout room. Okay, looks like he's there. Brittany or Edward, would one of you mind confirming that you can see my slides?
We can see your slides.
I see that. All right, great. I am going to start going then. Brittany, feel free to stop me if I'm getting ahead of the program. I think we're ready to start with the main event. All right. So hello, and thank you for attending this community meeting on the San Francisco School Access Plan, which will recommend ways that the city can support school transportation for kindergarten through 5th grade youth in San Francisco. Proposed solutions will focus on children and caregivers who are burdened by medium and long distance trips to school and after school activities. And solutions will seek to close equity gaps and provide sustainable transportation options that reduce vehicle travel. This work builds on the Transportation Authority's 2016 Child Transportation Survey, which found that most parents are interested in alternative options for their school commute. Here's our agenda for today. I'll start by discussing the study goals, then give you an overview of the outreach approach before discussing findings from our first round of public engagement. Findings from the first round of engagement informed the development of draft strategies, which I'll discuss next. Finally, I'll give you an update about next steps. We have 3 study goals. The first is to improve the quality and availability of transportation options to school and after-school activities, especially for vulnerable caregivers and students. The second is to ensure that school-related transportation options are safe. And our third is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, localized congestion, and air pollution around school sites. Specifically, we're focusing on K-5 students in SFUSD schools who need to make medium and long distance trips. We're focusing on long distance trips for younger students because in the 2016 study, which I mentioned earlier, these types of trips were found to be especially challenging for caregivers. San Francisco already has a Safe Routes to School program, which does really great work trying to help caregivers with short trips that can be done walking or biking. The school access plan, this study will complement that work by identifying strategies to improve the school commute for students who live far from school. But we applied for grant funding for the study in 2019 and received our award in 2020, which is a time when school trips weren't happening. Now, we couldn't talk to caregivers about school trips that weren't happening, but we were able to partner with the Department of Children, Youth, and Their Families, or DCYF, on some early outreach to youth. In 2021, the Department of Children, Youth, and Their Family had a Community Hubs initiative, which established learning areas for students who needed them, called Community Hubs. We designed an art-based activity and visited hubs around San Francisco to ask young people between the ages of 6 and 12 how they would like to get around. A few key themes emerged from their answers, which I'll touch on throughout the presentation. The drawings that you'll see in the presentation were also all created by students at these events. So, as San Francisco schools returned to in-person learning, we began outreach to caregivers, starting with a series of focus groups where we gathered information about the challenges of the school commute. Findings from those focus groups, which I'll cover shortly, informed the development of draft strategies. We're currently in our second round of outreach, which includes workshops, a survey, and pop-up events to gather feedback about the draft strategies as we work toward recommendations. So we're recruiting outreach participants from a wide range of SFUSD affiliated groups and parent advisory councils with a focus on English language learners. And we supplemented that with direct outreach to some community-based organizations which serve specific groups whose voices we wanted to make sure were included. We also have a survey which we're distributing through similar channels. If you have a young child in an SFUSD school and the school commute is difficult for you, we'd love your feedback on ways that the city can help. When this presentation is over, please take our survey at sfcta.org/school access. I'll drop that again in the chat later, but we're looking for feedback and we'd love to hear your perspective. Next, I'd like to discuss findings from our focus groups. So overall, focus groups confirmed quite a bit of previous knowledge, but added emphasis to a few places. When looking specifically at pain points, one piece of emphasis caregivers shared was a lack of personal safety they felt riding Muni. Caregivers also noted that having children at multiple schools created very challenging coordination issues and could result in idling time for students at school or caregivers doing pickup. Caregivers also discussed distrust with school officials and government generally. They're frustrated with long project timelines and poor communication. Rebuilding trust could be important to successfully implementing some strategies. And the other side of that, successfully implementing some strategies could help rebuild trust. Caregivers reaffirmed some well-known challenges to riding Muni, including long trips and transfers. And caregivers who drove also cited traffic as a challenge. Now, cost did not feature prominently in focus group conversations, but some caregivers did mention expensive fares as a barrier to taking Muni. The project team feel that we need to gather a bit more information to really understand the role that cost plays for caregivers in the school commute, and we're doing that through our current round of outreach. Let's turn to solutions. Perhaps unsurprisingly, caregivers are most interested in yellow school bus service. If we look at characteristics of solutions that caregivers want, flexibility appears important. This could mean flexibility in pickup or drop-off locations or in timing. When asked, caregivers did share that aftercare options could ease some time constraints if it allowed them more flexibility around pickup or drop-off timing. In the 2016 survey, about half of caregivers said that they would carpool given the right circumstances. There was still some openness to carpool solutions in our focus groups, but caregivers are also now considering COVID as one reason that carpool solutions might not work. Now, interestingly, this seems to have less to do with concerns about virus transmission and more to do with the fact that parents have less strong relationships with other caregivers emerging from the pandemic. So moving on to strategies, we've divided our draft strategies into 6 categories. These are strategies focused on improving transportation options, on personal safety, infrastructure safety, communication and information, reducing costs for caregivers, and finally, strategies specific for foster and homeless youth. First are strategies which are focused on new or improved transportation options, starting with traditional yellow school buses. The school access plan is focused on strategies that the city could pursue to support school access other than yellow school buses, but they're clearly an important part of the school transportation system. And we're working with SFUSD's transportation department to develop some scenarios and cost estimates for service expansion. Next, we have microtransit shuttles, which were explored in the TA's 2016 work. Shuttles could be provided either by a private company or through a model such as Bayview Moves, where community-based organizations pool resources to provide shared transportation. Next, the city could take a role in carpool coordination, either through promoting an existing third-party service or through a heavier touch organizational model where agency staff take an active role in coordinating rides. Our next strategy is to develop a lending library for electric bikes. The SFCTA's 2016 survey found that caregivers who biked had a really high satisfaction rate with their school commute. Caregivers in our focus groups expressed a lot of hesitation about biking, but some of their concerns, such as steep hills, children who are too young to operate a bicycle, and long distances, could be overcome with multi-passenger electric bikes. So far, caregivers in our workshops have shared that increasing access to e-bikes could be helpful. We have also heard that it needs to be safer to ride a bicycle in more places for this strategy to work well for everyone. Finally, there's the idea that I mentioned earlier of expanding before and after care programs to increase flexibility for caregivers. Next, we have strategies focused on personal safety, which was a clear point of emphasis for caregivers and the students we spoke with early in our outreach. The team developed some ideas about how to make improvements in that area as a response to those focus group findings. The first idea is to implement transit training or education programs. These could look like transit-focused field trips, where one purpose of the trip is to teach youngsters about transit safety and help everyone feel comfortable in that environment. The city could also promote bystander trainings focused on preparing caregivers for situations which could feel unsafe. Another idea is to make slight adjustments to Muni's existing MTAP or Muni Transit Assistance Program. The MTAP program trains members of the community in conflict resolution, then hires them as ambassadors to ride on specific routes with the purpose of diffusing and deterring conflicts. But currently, ambassador shifts begin at 9 a.m., missing the morning school commute. Ambassadors are also currently concentrated on middle and high schools without a focus on elementary school serving routes. The next category of focus is infrastructure safety. We're working closely with Muni's Safe Routes to Schools and schools engineering groups to develop recommendations about how to keep students safe from drivers at school sites. Besides supporting SFMTA's existing engineering programs, the city could also offer best practices guidance for school administrators around transportation infrastructure, which they manage. For example, color curves are handled on a request basis, and pickup or drop-off policies and norms are also left to school sites. Finally, we think that the city should continue to advocate for legislation which allows us to lower speed limits or install innovative speed enforcement tools around schools. The next set of strategies is focused on building trust between caregivers, city, and school officials. One option would be hiring or designating transportation coordinators who provide information about transportation programs and serve as liaisons between caregivers, schools, and transportation operators. Another option would be to create a standing advisory committee or forum, which allows caregivers to provide ongoing feedback to city and school officials. Finally, we're considering a pretty high-level recommendation that city and school officials increase regular outreach on transportation issues. The next category of strategies involves reducing costs for caregivers. Recommending any of these strategies would require the study team developing a better understanding of how cost pressures are experienced by caregivers. However, it would be good to understand whether there are opportunities to increase the reach or awareness of discounted fare programs. Another idea that grew out of the Peer City review would be to just provide stipends for families for transportation. The final category of strategies are specific to foster and homeless youth. The study team is working with the SFUSD Foster Youth Services Coordinating Office to develop recommendations specific to these populations, which each have access to different existing services and are entitled to different rights in state law. The first strategy here focuses on allowing SFUSD employees to provide school of origin transportation. The second would be to break down bureaucratic hurdles that prevent SFUSD from purchasing youth rate clipper cards for foster and homeless youth. Finally, we're considering a recommendation to establish a forum for coordination between neighboring school districts and child welfare departments, because many school trips for these populations are made across county lines. So what comes next? We're currently finishing our second and final round of outreach. We will be analyzing the data collected in our workshops and survey in the coming months, then using that data to refine and evaluate these draft strategies. We will develop funding and implementation plans for promising strategies, culminating in a final report in the spring of 2023. So that concludes my presentation. I appreciate all of you listening, and I'm now available to take questions if you have any.
David, I'm seeing two hands. Let's start with Hayden. Hayden, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Hello. Yeah, I guess it's maybe more of a comment than a question, but I would just say I'm somebody who goes to, high school now on the bus, but I also used to go to middle and elementary school also on the bus. And I think the biggest issues are not necessarily cost, but I think the issues are that the bus is too crowded. And I think the other issue is that the bus is too slow. And so I think those are the real issues. And I would also say that I support looking into biking and stuff like that as other ways to get to school beyond like carpooling and cars, because I don't know. Yeah.
Thanks for your input, Hayden. Brandy, I see your hand.
Hi, I am a parent of a fifth grader. And just first of all, before I ask my question, I want to thank everybody that put all the hard work into organizing this. Edward, MTA folks, really appreciate it. So a lot of our elementary schools are not staffed, I think, adequately when it comes to school crossing guard. My son has to cross 12th Avenue, is across, actually walks along Trox Avenue, has to cross California, which is a block and a half from Park Presidio, and there are cars zooming by. I know before the pandemic, we always had for 1 year, we had a school crossing guard. And I remember a few years ago when I had an internship in Supervisor Fewer's office, some of the school crossing guards saying like, it's just hard for us to survive on the pay that we get. We don't work enough hours to get benefits. And hopefully there's, the labor, side as well. But what this means is that our kids in 4th and 5th grade are allowed to walk to and from school by themselves. But a lot of times they're having to do that crossing really busy intersections that don't have school crossing guards. So, yeah, I just feel like that is, obviously that the horrible is something happened to a kid, but like at this intersection I mentioned, like we've had neighbors and teachers who've been T-boned at the intersection. So really, I think just, making our streets more safe and specifically, doing, whatever it takes to make sure that every school has an adequate number of school crossing guards would be really helpful and really essential, I think.
Thanks for your input, Randy. I'll share that.
Is that something that has come up or been discussed, or?
So, yes, I'll say the concerns that you've raised are pretty well known and understood. The crossing guard program is managed by SFMTA as part of their Safe Routes to School programming. And the challenge that you raised about hiring and retaining crossing guards is absolutely a challenge that they're aware of and trying to work through. It's a challenge to keep those jobs staffed, as I understand it, but I will pass along the feedback and make sure that we're coordinating with them to the extent possible
I think a lot of the things with the benefits, and I know Supervisor Fewer was investigating at the time or asking, can they be stationed at other places? Because obviously it's not enough for a 40-hour work week. It's just like, we have some in the Richmond district, we have some senior centers, or, near our pharmacies where a lot of our seniors are, they need safe streets as well. So, is that something, that DCYF can work with the Department of Aging on, and maybe just, getting these folks full time, so it'll be easier to fill these positions.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Brandy. And I just wanted to jump in and speak briefly from our office's perspective. This is certainly something we've heard from parents at schools across District 4. And I'm sure that, parents have similar concerns citywide. And we've had a series of conversations with MTA and are very interested in exploring any kind of creative solutions we can do to look at additional uses of those crossing guards to be able to expand their hours and turn that into more of a full-time position. One idea that we'd been talking with MTA about was looking at the ambassador model. The city's expanded our community ambassador programs in so many ways. And we think there might be a good path forward there of thinking of crossing guards also as a form of a community ambassador and seeing how that might be a way to look at getting more hours. But definitely an area of high interest and a priority for us. And I'd be happy to talk with you more offline about that too.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Edward. Nick, I see a hand.
Yeah, thank you. I used to be the sustainability director for the school district and worked, was basically the main point of contact for the school district on the Safe Routes to School program. So I have a lot of experience, and that's why I'm dumping a lot of ideas into the chat. I could speak for hours on this, and I won't, but I want to second that point about crossing guards. Do you happen to know if the MTA ever reevaluated all crossing guard locations? That was something that was supposed to happen. Excuse me, as we were heading into the pandemic, and then I was gone for the last 2 years. But one of the key points that we realized was that crossing guards have been placed based on demand, essentially, and requests from various schools, and that the placement of those crossing guards had never been cross-referenced with the high injury network. In other words, we could have crossing guards in schools where there has never been a crash, and we could not have crossing guards at locations on the high injury network because we don't have enough staff, and we had up until that point never reanalyzed and reshuffled where those crossing guards go. And I really think it would be worth talking to, can't remember her name now, but you know my colleague at the MTA who was responsible for crossing guards, to see if that process ever finished and whether we can use a data-driven approach for placing crossing guards rather than continuing this legacy approach of putting crossing guards where people yell the loudest, because we know that that is not the best way to promote safety. And then just generally, I guess I would say that, you know, a lot of things that you're hearing from focus groups and so forth, and that we heard back then, is that people just need better infrastructure, safer routes to school in order to feel comfortable using these other modes. And as we know, this city has some issues delivering in a rapid fashion because there's a lot of input from people whose priorities seem to be weighed the same as the safety concerns that we're trying to address. And I think one thing that will be really helpful is if somehow out of this whole process, we are able to develop some protocols for implementing projects quicker and not always worrying about that parking spot that might disappear when we increase the size of a bulb out or add some red lanes. My last point will just be that there are 3 things that I think are kind of school quick build projects, or like a package of projects that I think will be useful. That would be upgrading crosswalks around schools to make sure they're freshly painted and bright. Secondly, daylighting intersection around schools, which should not just be red paint to avoid cars parking at those corners, but actually the painted bulb outs on the ground at a minimum. And I can't remember what my third proposal is, but I'll put it in the chat if I think of it later. But those are kind of the things that we are noodling around with when I was still at the school district, and hopefully we can make some progress at some point. Thanks a lot. My kids are at Glen Park, and I've been reaching out to figure out how we can get a bulb out there.
Thanks for your input. Lots of good ideas. Appreciate putting them in the chat. If you want to put them in our survey too, put them in all the places. That's great. Thank you.
And David, would it be okay if I just added some context around some of what Nick just said?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Nick, thank you so much for being here and sharing, you know, your experience and expertise on this. It's definitely appreciated. Again, you know, just speaking from a district core office perspective, and I also want to recognize this plan is a citywide plan, right? So it's not just limited to our district, and that was important to us. But did just want to mention that in D4, we are really excited about moving forward the Sunset Neighborways project that is intended to create a network of 9 streets that are prioritizing walking and biking, slower streets, safer streets. And we, for our part, really prioritized centering outreach to public school communities throughout the first phase of street selection for that project. And we'll be doing that again as we move through the design phase of the project. And that's something we're really excited about. And then totally hear you on daylighting. A point of frustration that we've had is the lack of data-driven or comprehensive approaches to daylighting. So something that we took on starting back in 2019 actually was something we called the District 4 Daylighting Initiative, where we proactively used crash data, but also proximity to senior centers, schools, and commercial corridors to identify the highest priority intersections for daylighting across the Sunset, which then got daylighted. So I think we'd love to see something like that done citywide as well.
Thanks for adding that perspective, Edward. Maria.
Yeah, hi, my name is Maria. I'm the organizer of Parent Voices, San Francisco. When my kids are grown now, but when they were little, Laidlaw had a monopoly and school busing. And I remember my kid had to be bused to Treasure Island, and our complaint was there was only one adult in the big bus, and my son called it a dog pound. So my question, you mentioned micro transit and shuttles and e-bike and other transportation programs. So is the era of school buses gone? I mean, it's been so long since my kids were little, but our work is around early care and education. Many of our parents have actually school age, and I don't see any of them sign up tonight. I'm sorry, but we're thinking of smaller kids, like the kindergartners. When their parents have to go to work, the transportation would help. How can you make it safe for the younger ones, for the little kids, to be transported to school without their parents? Would there be, like, maybe instead of just the driver in the minibus, there would be another adult? Have you looked at that?
Yeah, thanks, Maria. So I think the short answer is yes. The strategies that I've presented are still in draft form, and we are going to be adding detail to them and trying to sort of design them and tailor them based on the feedback that we're hearing right now through meetings like this, through our survey, through our series of in-language workshops that are happening this month. And we're asking questions like that. We're asking, how can each of these strategies be designed to best work for you? And we're asking this question to caregivers of young kids. And that is something that we've heard from multiple caregivers, is that having additional folks on a bus besides the driver would make the option work better for them, make them feel more comfortable and on it. So these are the kinds of things that we're discussing right now and trying to sort of understand what is going to make the strategies work best. Ideas like that are totally on the table.
Yeah.
You asked whether yellow school buses. Did you want to jump in?
Mm-hmm. Oh no, I was just remembering yellow school buses. One of our biggest fights then was to make them green buses, because younger children have more sensitive lungs, and I know many of these buses are run on diesel fuel, and we want to make sure that these buses are clean or have air particulate filters, or yeah, so just make sure.
I can share that yellow school buses are not a thing of the past, but service has been reduced. Service was reduced. The service that the school district was able to provide was reduced pretty drastically after the 2008 recession. And due to budget concerns at the district, it's never really recovered to where it was. The district does provide some limited busing for general education students, as well as to all of their special education students who need it. But the good news is they are in the process of transitioning to all electric buses. So that is something that is in the works. And although SFUSD's yellow school bus services are not the focus of the school access plan, we are working with them to try and understand whether there are opportunities for service expansion to bring some buses back, and how much those kinds of things might cost, just so that we all sort of have the information to have that conversation.
Do you also have more Muni buses running in the morning and in the afternoon when the kids are going to school and leaving school in the corridors where that feeds to this school?
Yeah, I think what you're maybe referencing is called the school tripper service, which is something that SFMTA runs, where they run extra buses along routes that have students on them during the morning and the afternoon when school's running out. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Edward, I saw you unmute briefly. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Just briefly, I was just going to say, the question that really led to this study and this plan that we asked was, what would it take to get yellow school buses back? So that really was kind of the inception of this. And then through the course of, designing the scope of work for this plan, we really wanted to look more broadly at all, at all the different potential options and solutions, but also all the different challenge areas that parents and students experience. So that's certainly one thing that's being looked at, but it's as David has outlined, certainly not the only thing. Yeah, so just wanted to speak briefly to that, and then also just acknowledge that the school tripper service is certainly really, really important. We still have not yet seen a full restoration of school tripper service from SFMTA following the pandemic. That's certainly something that we hope to see come back. And see how we can further expand and improve that. The 29 Rapid project, for instance, is something we're really excited about in our district, because that is certainly very crowded and utilized by many, many students.
Before I move on to Monica, I'll just say, Maria, if you want to plug our survey with the young SFUSD parents who you are connected with, we'd love to play.
Hi.
Monica, I see a hand up.
Hi. Let me take it down. Let's see. Sorry, I came in late. I set an alarm and it didn't go off, but I have two very big concerns. One, I live in the Bayview. I live next to Carver Elementary School. And for the last, I want to say at least 10 years, I've been trying to get where I'm at, it's on a hill. And Carver Elementary School is on a dead end of Oakdale and Keith. Cars fly down Keith Street and also fly up Keith Street like it's a roller coaster. There are no school signs posted on either Keith or Oakdale, and I've been fighting the city to try to put a speed limit, to put to put different types of signs on Keith Street. We do have a cross guard. At one point there was two, and cars were still running the stop signs. This is an elementary school, and a lot of the time students are walking on their own. And I've driven around different elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, and whether there's a hill or not, all schools have signs to say to slow down, and this one doesn't. And I keep getting refusal letters. They're just rejecting my request, which doesn't make sense to me. Number two, this meeting was for K-5 transportation service. I live in the Bayview. My kids went to Alice Fong U. It's in the Sunset District. That is a K-8 school. If my kids wouldn't have had school bus service up until the 8th grade, then they would have never had an opportunity to go to Alice Fong U. Fortunately, they did. And it's only a block away from my house where I was able to take them and bring them, and then they would be able to ride the school bus back. I have fought the district 3 times just recently this year, and there was a great article on the sfbayview.com paper because the principal was refusing to allow students, middle school students, to get on the bus. So there's a hardship for a family that might have several different children at that school. Some might be in 2nd grade, some might be in 6th. So the family will then have to take their elementary school student to the bus stop, but then see their 10, 11-year-old to go get on Muni if they ride from the Bayview, which is absolutely wrong. It's wrong. And what are families supposed to do? She was saying that there was no bus, there was no room on the bus, which wasn't true. I fought it. My niece was allowed to get on the bus. But my question is, if you bus middle school students that are not K-8, because you have Hoover, you have Aptus, you have James Lake, and so forth, that do get on a school bus that are just 6th through 8th grade to and from the Bayview, then why are you not servicing K-8 schools for? Just don't understand. I don't understand what's going on. So those are my two big concerns, and I will continue to fight this if they don't allow Bayview students to ride a school bus to and from a K-8 school, because we don't have any options here in the Bayview. We don't have K-8 schools. We don't have language immersion programs. So if we do get that opportunity to take our child to a different neighborhood so they could have a great opportunity in a great school, we will do it. But then we need the service. So those are my two biggest concerns.
Thank you for sharing, Monica. And I'm sorry that that's a fight that you have had to fight. I will bring your thoughts about the traffic calming that's needed on Keith up with my colleagues who work in streets at SFMTA, and I can also discuss the needs of K-8 schools with my colleagues at SFUSD and the transportation department. So I'll pass
Thank
on
you.
concerns. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts? We will be posting recordings of these presentations on our website. So if you tuned in late, they will be available to rewatch. And we welcome feedback through our survey through the end of the week. If you come up with something later that you wish that you had said, but didn't think of in the moment, that's open and we'd love to hear from you. I'll give it another few seconds, but I'm not seeing any hands raised. All right. Thank you, Brittany. You just dropped the link to our survey in the chat. Monica, I can send you my email as well. I'll do that shortly. Okay. Well, if we're not, actually, Brittany, I see that the Cantonese room may have closed. Do we know if the Spanish room is still going?
It looks like it still is, but let me check in.
Yeah. Well, I think that we should probably not close the main room and risk kicking them all off. So perhaps if there are no other outstanding questions, I'll just once more say thanks everyone for joining. Thank you again, Edward, for helping to organize this meeting, and for your office for all your coordination and cooperation. And thanks everybody who shared your thoughts either out loud or through the survey, or if you just tuned in to listen. I'll just be hanging out here until the Spanish room wraps up, and then we'll close out. So feel free to stay or leave as you'd like.
Thanks so much, David, and thanks everyone for participating. Just to note, as this moves forward and we look forward to the final report and in the spring, we will continue to need, public participation and collaboration, not just in finishing this plan, but then turning that plan into action, and making sure that we can actually see all of these new ideas happen. So we'll certainly be in touch more about that looking forward. But thank you all for coming tonight.